In previous videos, we have talked about the problem of moral hazard when we design welfare programs and possible ways out of this problem. Here we can use categorical welfare programs, target specific groups, or we can use ordeal mechanisms, which are obviously controversial and at times not very humane. But they exist. And a third possibility, what we're talking about now, is to increase the outside option or improve the outside option. So what do we mean by that? So far, the options for people are, roughly speaking, either work or not to work and to receive welfare benefit. And obviously, what they choose, if they can choose, what they choose will depend on how attractive the next best alternative is. So if for someone, if either they value leisure very highly, or if they don't have a high earnings potential, then they will most likely choose not to work or to work very little for purely rational reasons. Because the opportunity cost of not working is very, very low. So if you spend, if you can only earn a very small amount to begin with, for whatever reason, then it's much more beneficial for you to stay at home because your foregone earnings are not as much compared to someone who can earn €100 an hour. But obviously, what the government can do is, and probably what should be, our intuition would tell us is what should be done first, is that it should actually provide better opportunities for people. And so here are some possibilities that a government has to actually change outside options. So one is to provide training. To the extent that job training improves people's earnings, that obviously makes then leisure less attractive and work relatively more attractive. Another example are labor market subsidies, whereby employers are paid a certain amount or workers can directly get a top up of their wage so that the wage they receive is actually above the market wage. Now this comes typically with its own challenges, because there is obviously there could be crowding out effects whereby companies don't pay as much as they otherwise would because they know that the government is going to top up. But if they don't do that or don't do that much, then that could also be a way forward or a way to increase people's outside option. Another example is the provision of childcare that then helps people to work full time and again has a positive effect on people's earnings and improves their outside options. So sudden also leisure becomes a lot less attractive and relative to what it was before when childcare was not available. And traditionally, because childcare traditionally was done by women, this mainly increased mothers' employment. Obviously, in this day and age, one would hope that parenting is split more evenly between men and women, and so that slide should probably at some point be adjusted to just say increase the employment of primary carers, but traditionally it would have been mothers. It's definitely consistent with the data. So here we can see on this slide, what's building up here is what a change in the outside option would do. So what we compare here is the line in blue. That's the budget constraint we initially had with a wage of $12.50. And we said that we have this floor of the general guaranteed benefit that everyone is entitled to, whether they work or not. And then that would be the case with a 100% benefit reduction. Now, if we then have a higher wage, either because the person has been trained or because they receive a subsidy, the line pivots around the point where the hours of leisure actually so around the point here where the hours of leisure are cross the zero line. So where the hours of leisure are actually the maximum. Why is that? Well, because you can't expand the number of hours someone has. The day only has 24 hours. But obviously what expands here is if they worked all of these hours, so they worked 2,000 hours, with a wage of $17.50, they could now afford more. Okay, that's why the budget constraint pivots around this point C. And then comes the question, what's going to happen to people? What are they going to decide on? Well, then again, that depends very much on what their preferences look like. Okay, but what could happen, this is one example here, for a person who was initially indifferent between working and not working under the benefit system, where it was a general guaranteed benefit, so that the blue budget line, the one with the pink point, that person, if the alternative was not general benefits, how that line with the king point would indicate, but actually just an increase in outside options, that person would actually have an incentive to work ever so slightly more. Okay, so here we see their hours of leisure would be 1,027 without that increase, and after that increase, they would actually work 1,000 hours, so they would have less leisure, but actually then have a huge increase in consumption. Okay, because and the way this goes, whether people following an increase in wages will work more or less, is an empirical question. Both are plausible. Both are governed by two effects that have opposite signs. So we will learn this in lecture 6, or we'll look at this in a bit more depth. But there is the income and the substitution effect, and one tells us that basically as wages go up, working becomes relatively more attractive, and we would expect people to work more. Right, so that's the substitution effect. But on the other hand, there could also be an income effect. So think about people who have an earnings target. So they need to earn a certain amount to pay their mortgage, pay childcare, and live a happy life. But anything beyond that, they don't really care that much. And so what it means then, if they have a higher wage, they can actually achieve that level with less work. And so they would basically have the same disposable income with less work. And that's called the income effect. And that would lead to less work. So here, in that case, the substitution effect would be larger than the income effect. So we would actually see people have less leisure and work more. So again, what this example has shown us is that increasing the outside options is, from an incentive perspective, probably the best, because it does away with moral hazard and it improves the opportunity for people, especially when we're talking about things like education and training and whatever enables people to earn their own income and not rely on social welfare. So any of these programs, I guess we can all agree, or most of us agree, that these are very desirable. Now, to what extent they can be implemented in practice is a different question, because again, the question is, to what extent can you improve the chances of a lot of people who are currently unemployed, for example? To what extent can you actually put measures in place to improve their opportunities in the labor market? That depends very much on who those people are, what the labor market situation looks like, what the business cycle looks like, and so on. It's not necessarily an easy task, but if it is available, it has those two advantages. Advantage one, it does away with all those incentive problems of moral hazard. Advantage two, it just improves people's economic situation, and that is unambiguously a great thing, but it might not be as simple to do as this graph would actually indicate.